Start with this. Urgent efforts are underway to try and resolve a nationwide truck drivers' strike. eNCA reporter Mangoba Mchunu is in the City Deep, where truckers have blockaded the road. He spoke to the All Truck Drivers Foundation in Gauteng about their concerns.
We want to see only that only South African drivers must drive the trucks. But we are coming from that meeting with the ministers. It seems that we have a confused minister because he says there is a document that is going to guide us how the employers must employ foreigners and South African. That is not true, because on the Labour Act it's clear that you only employ a foreign on a scarce skill. But now it seems that they don't know. They don't know even what is happening outside. When you look here, we have drivers unemployed, but foreigners they are driving the trucks. They are out with the trucks. That is our big problem. What we want to see, we want the minister to state it clear. If they are pleased with that document, they must tell all the companies that employ foreign nationals to stop until they finish with that document, where it's going to guide us, how the document can guide us while we are unemployed, but those foreigners are still working.
Well, let's stay with the story now and speak to the Labour and Employment Minister, Thulas Nxesi, joining us by Skype. Minister, very good afternoon to you. So the truck drivers, some of whom have taken to the streets today protesting against what they say is unfair labour practices and an increase in the employment of foreign drivers, of a local labour, have been calling for, among other things, government intervention in the issue. What solution are you bringing forward?
I think you must remember that South Africa is part of the wider economic networks, the AU and particularly SADC, in which we seek to expand trade and economic activity. Therefore, we cannot just quarantine ourselves from the rest of the continent. And the economic development of the country has always sourced labor from the wider pool. And South Africa is also a signatory to a number of international treaties and in the ILO and a number of conventions which we have to honor those, and giving sanctuary and the rights of the refugees. That's not going to change, but in some sectors we also seek to attract the scarce skills. That does not apply to the road freight sector. And our aim here is to manage the use of the foreigners and to provide opportunities to the local drivers and to enforce decent standards and healthy and safety workers. We have had a good meeting today where we have been able to deal with a number of issues. First, we've said the task team which we had set up last year, continuing to look into this complex matter, which is not just going to be affecting South Africa, but the whole SADC region, continues to do the work. But it can't, in the midst of violence, and all the bodies who were there today in the meeting they were in agreement in the total condemnation of the violence by all stakeholders. And we have said the task team is sitting looking into these issues. We are also in a process of looking into new regulations in relation to the employment of the foreign nationals. And we're saying it's not only the road and the freight sector. We're talking about the hospitality industries, we're talking the restaurants, the security industry, we're talking also about the farming and agriculture. So we're looking into this matter in a proper way. And remember that we can't just do away with these foreigners. Some of them are refugees and legally they are supposed to be here. The issue we have to deal with is the illegal people who have been employed without any papers from Home Affairs.
Let me ask you this, Minister, and forgive me for jumping in, but we have very limited time. What does the law say about the hiring of foreign nationals over locals in industries that aren't specialized, such as driving trucks? Does it not say that locals should get preference?
Definitely it says that.
So why is it not happening?
But these guys are not talking about locals' preference. They say there must be no foreigners in total, and we disagree with that. Those who are refugees, they have a right they have all the rights in this particular country to employment and so on. And these are the issues which we're dealing with. And what we are saying now, our law will need to be specific in terms of the regulations and say in this sector, it might not be necessary to employ any foreigner in that particular sector. In other sectors, we might open, and if you open, the ratios must be like that. Or we put this particular ratio. That's the debate which we are having.
Minister, you're talking about refugees, the employment of people who are from the SADC region, and yes, of course, even the drivers who gathered today in Johannesburg have said theirs is not a xenophobic demonstration. Are you saying to me now that all the foreign nationals employed in the freight industry are people who were refugees and were hired because there was no local labor to fill those positions? Is that what you're telling me?
Some are refugees who have a status in South Africa.
How many are not refugees?
We are not sure about that. Some are refugees and they are looking for employment opportunities. Some are illegal, and we have to deal with those who are illegal. But allow us to come up with that particular regulation which is going to be specific on all these issues, because the law is just general to say, don't just bring in the skill which is available in the country. It's too general. We will have to be specific in terms of dealing with that.
I want to go back to September, Minister Nxesi, because there was another task team at the time, and one of the outcomes from the meetings of that task team was this, and I quote, "The task team agreed to develop a clear action plan to provide regular updates on the progress made by the joint interministerial team. It would continuously have inspections in all provinces to ensure compliance by the freight industry." How is it then, if this was said in September, you've still not been able to come together and get numbers of instances where indeed there have been flaws in the freight industry's employment practices?
Remember, we are not dealing with a company here. We are dealing with a multi-stakeholder issue. You're dealing with the employers. You're dealing with the employees. Some of them are organized employers. The truck drivers, which we're talking about, are also not registered unions. But we have to bring them into the bargaining council. But we have also to deal with the governments of the SADC region. So the process is going to be long. We are not just going to push it as government. That's why we must be... we must wait for that particular process, be patient in dealing with all those issues, but ultimately we are going to be able to come with a proper solution. So when you're dealing with many stakeholders, you're dealing about changing the law and so on. It's not just going to be a straightforward process. People have different views on these issues. And then we have to keep a balance of putting what I've said, the international conventions which we are part of. And we want to also increase our market. And if we want to increase our market, how do we close the other people from the very same region where we want to increase our market to, and we have to access into that? Where are we going to export those goods?
I appreciate what you're saying about how this takes time, Minister, but it's been 10 months since that commitment was made in September of 2019. How much more time do you need for this? And are you not worried about how a further continuation, a further apparent delay in the process could lead to some of the violence that has at times been associated with unhappiness in the truck industry?
You're saying it's 10 months, you don't count December. You know that most of the industries...
Okay, it's been 9 months. How much more time do you need?
You don't even talk about the COVID, which has closed the operations of the people for 3 months. You must consider even all those areas. And COVID has disturbed us on our own teams to be able to meet and deal with the issues.
Okay, and Minister, let me ask you this way. I beg your pardon. How much progress had you made before March, because that's when the lockdown started? How much progress had you made? How much ground had you covered?
There's a lot of progress. A document is going to be released within the next 2 weeks, which will be sent to all the various stakeholders to comment on that. And don't expect that they will take a week or just a month. They will have to do a lot of consultation about that.
So in your commitment today, or your engagement, I beg your pardon, with the freight industry today, what commitment have they made to you, and what sort of commitments around deadlines have you all agreed to?
We've agreed that the task teams are going to continuously meet under the leadership of the ministry, meeting every week. We've agreed to fast-track all these issues which I'm talking about of the labor and immigration policies. And we have agreed also that the Department of Labor, together with Home Affairs, are also going to fast-track their own international engagement with their counterparts in the region and even at the AU level.
How do you do this effectively, Minister, without clear set timelines and deadlines where everyone is able to monitor progress at the same pace? Because the difficulty when you don't have agreed timelines and deadlines is that you also risk a flare-up then in between the various stages of the process.
Unfortunately, we can't put timelines for the other governments. We will have to discuss those timelines with them. For us to release a document, a month is enough. 2 to 3 weeks to a month is enough.
Will we be having the same conversation in 2021?
If it needs be, but we know that within the next 3 to 4 months, we might have completed all the consultation.
So as things stand, there will not be another strike from the industry?
We have appealed to everybody that if you want a proper engagement and cooperation and collective decision-making, we must not go into the strikes. We can't decide. We have appealed to the different parties. They have a right to strike, but the issue to us, what is key, is there must be no violence.
Final question then, Minister. What responsibility do you, as government that oversees the various industries in this country, take for the situation that's unfolding, given that it's not a new case?
We are leading the process. We are looking at the solution together with the parties. That's the responsibility what we're taking as the Department of Employment and Labour, is to lead this particular process and engage all the stakeholders. And remember, the truck drivers who are now who have been blocking the roads, they are not even registered unions. For them to negotiate, even in the bargaining council, they do not consult, and we have given them ways of how to register as proper unions so that they can be able to negotiate in the various chambers. So there are those processes which have to be followed. Otherwise, we're also breaking the law.
You talk about leading, so you would not agree that you've so far failed in leading this, given that it's gone on for years?
That's your opinion.
It's not my opinion. I'm asking you, Minister, if you don't think you've failed.
That's your opinion. Insofar as we are concerned, we are engaged in the processes, and the task teams have been continuing.
All right. Labour and Employment Minister Thulas Nxesi, thank you so much for being on eNCA, sir.